Good evening. Welcome to our Tuesday night series. This is an off-script series as opposed to our formal lectures. Instead, we are doing the second of our podcast reactions to old movies. And we previously did Passion of the Christ. And to this night, Leandro and I are here to do King of Kings, a 1961 classic about the life of Jesus. I'm here in Center Place live streaming to you, and Leandro is in Argentina.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this just review of a movie that I had never heard about that John suggested, and I'm glad he did it, John. Like, I really enjoyed the movie for two reasons.
Well, Leandro, let's save that until after the intro.
Yeah.
We'll get into the podcast.
Go ahead.
Proper.
I'm really excited about talking about the movie. So
okay.
That's why.
Okay, very good. I want to hear it. But in the meantime, I'm going to tell everybody happy holidays, Merry Christmas. We're really excited to be coming to you. As always, there will be Q&A. Actually, this time it'll be interspersed within the whole thing. So Mike is here, and he's watching your comments on the chats, and he's going to be sharing those with us. We also want to remind you that we appreciate all of your support. This is the end of the year. If you would like to make a donation in support of our channel, you can do that. There's a super chat, and you can also do that to get a tax-deductible receipt in the United States and Canada by going to our website, centerplace.ca. All right. Our topic this evening is a historian and a theologian react to King of Kings, a 1961 movie about the life of Jesus. This is the second time we are doing a kind of a movie conversation, and we'll do a summary, and we're going to react to different scenes. We're not sure. We gave you all a chance to watch this ahead of time. We're not sure if you all did, but we'll summarize it, and I've brought a bunch of frame caps with us. Leandro is joining us, as we just said, from Argentina. Hi, Leandro.
Hi, John. Hi, everyone. Yeah, this was a wonderful movie to watch as I traveled. It's a long way from Toronto to Argentina, and it took me 24 hours from door to door. And so having this movie, which is very long, was a wonderful thing to spend the time, and also at parts fall asleep on the plane. So there were some parts that the movie gets a little bit slow, but then the movie also has these really dramatic gospel scenes. And at least from my perspective as a theologian, I'm always really excited to see how is this production, this director, and everyone who participated, all the consultants, interpreting scripture, the history, mixing both together, and how often they forget that there's a whole third dimension that is also the theology that we have in scripture. And as a result, it's interesting. There's accidental theological claims that the filmmakers sometimes claim, and sometimes there's many scenes that are perhaps have absolutely no theology, and it's mostly just dramatization that doesn't really add a lot to it, doesn't make any theological claim, so it becomes a little bit flat from a theological perspective. But overall, it was a very interesting thing to watch.
Yeah, well, I think that we'll get into it, but I think that there's some choices that the filmmakers made specifically surrounding Jesus and how Jesus is being portrayed throughout this whole thing that definitely reflect, I think, a theological bent more than trying to get the history accurate or even or being true to any one of the Gospels. It's obviously all the Gospels kind of glommed together and, kind of then cut for time, whatever they want to put in. And then I was sad that I know that you got to watch it on the plane. I watched it alone, and I was sad about it because there were a couple places where I'm like, but why did they do that? And I was like, ah, and so I wanted you to be there so I could kind of yell at the film for it with you. Instead, I had it to myself. So we'll get to those, when we do as we go through a summary. Okay. Well, do you want to begin with a summary, Leandro? Should we do that?
Let's dive in.
Okay, we'll dive right in. We have screen caps that we've taken, and we'll be displaying these as we go through. So it begins with this grand overture. This is like a old classic grand Hollywood cast of thousands style movie, a movie like the Ten Commandments or Cleopatra, a Ben-Hur, these giant movies that are the kind of sword and sandals classics. And so it begins with a musical overture before even you get to the credits. And that's a kind of a thing for epic movies in the past. And they got the same composer who did Quo Vadis, Ben-Hur, Ivanhoe, and El Cid. So that's Miklos Rocha, who also did this one. And I wasn't as immediately sold because I didn't know this theme the way I know the theme to the Ten Commandments, for example. But over the course of the movie, I did kind of, the music is strong and it is a major element in it.
Yeah.
All right. So
definitely, and I do like this kind of like theatrical big Hollywood music from this era. I just find it. It really puts me in the mood, and I think that overall, it helps add to scripture and to these stories, like a certain emotional component to it that sometimes otherwise, if you just read the Bible, if you have someone reading it from the pulpit who is not putting a lot of emotion to it, sometimes because the text is just. It's going to be flat. You're just going to be missing like, oh, this is supposed to be a very tense moment. There's supposed to be suspense or tension here. So I think they did a good job with that in the movie.
So like when you're giving a sermon, you want to have a score going under.
I would love
dramatic violins in a particular.
With the band.
Oh yeah, that's great. And also another thing that lends it kind of this. Air of scripture is that the narrator is Orson Welles. And so he's got that, very booming, authoritative voice. He's sometimes quoting scripture, but more often he's summarizing exposition for the filmmaker in a kind of a scripture talk to make it sort of make you think that it's scripture. And so he's summarizing what's happening. And so he'll come in every once in a while when time is going to elapse or when you want to have things happen off camera that they don't want to film and so on.
Yeah, and so why don't we go to the first scene?
Yeah.
Because he does that in the first scene in a way that really caught me off guard.
Yeah.
I'll tell you why.
Yeah, well, so the movie very unexpectedly begins with Pompey the Great's legions marching on Jerusalem. And so this is when, Pompey is one of the main generals in the Roman Civil War, his competitor with Caesar, and ultimately, initially an ally, a sort of ally in the first triumvirate, and then ultimately a competitor. And when Caesar defeats Pompey, that's really Caesar's ascendance over the whole Roman Republic. And so Pompey, as Caesar's off, he gained his power by conquering Gaul and stuff like that. Pompey, as this great general, conquered the Seleucid kingdom, Syria and the East. And while he was there, he conquers Judea, which had for this brief moment has been an independent kingdom under the Hasmoneans, under the Maccabees. But it's sort of a surprising place for a movie about the life of Jesus to begin. So it's set here now, whatever this is, 60 BC or something like that. Whenever Pompey, I can't remember the exact year, but anyway, whenever Pompey gets down there, it's a long time before anyway. It's not immediately before Jesus. And so then we have this introduces us to the big set, which is the big Jerusalem set as Pompey's troops run in. And it also introduces us to kind of the cast of thousands kind of thing, which is they got a lot of people, and half of them are in Roman centurion kind of garb, and then half of them are in dressed as Jewish priests and things like that. Pompey enters the temple. The high priests all line up to prevent him from going in. He gives them a nod to his troops. They all throw javelins. They throw their javelins perfectly, and they just get hit all the priests, who all collapse. And then he goes into the temple itself. And inside the Holy Holies, he's supposedly going in there because he wants to rob all the gold, which is normal temples have gold in them. Actually, the temple did have a lot of gold in it. And so usually you would raid the temple treasury got raided on multiple occasions in different times because people kept their gold in the temples. One of the reasons why modern banks look like Greek temples is because of the association of keeping gold in the temple for safekeeping. Anyway, Pompey finds nothing in there. Yeah, of course, Gentiles are not allowed in there. And so he goes in there and desecrates it. Instead, all he finds is a Torah scroll, which he takes out. And he sort of ostentatiously is going to burn it. This is like the original Torah, apparently. And he's going to burn it, but he doesn't. So one of the priests gets it and takes it away. And so in terms of the background of this, Pompey did enter the Holy of Holies. So that is one thing that happened. Although it doesn't seem, he later presented that anyway as, well, that was a mistake. He didn't mean to do that. He didn't realize you weren't supposed to go in there, kind of thing. It's presented as much more aggressive, because considering all the priests get massacred and that kind of thing.
Is that historical? All the priests getting killed like that in that very theatrical way?
So I don't think so. I think that essentially he's got a big army. I mean, I didn't reread precisely what happened, but what I remember is that Pompey does desecrate the temple, but he doesn't do it and make a big point of it the way Antiochus Epiphanes, the Seleucid king, had done, during the, right before the miracle that creates Hanukkah and everything like that, so that's a couple centuries before. So this happens, but they kind of just say, oh, well, he didn't mean it, and they do a little purification thing, and it's a do-over. So it didn't end in making, the way the movie presents it, it makes it out as though now the Judeans ever after are going to not like Rome, right? And so essentially it's an ending rebellion from this moment of conquest all the way through to the time of Jesus, and presumably all the way through, after the movie's over, to the first Roman Jewish War. This is not, for example, how Josephus portrays it. Josephus says, essentially his perspective is the Romans and the Judeans generally get along. It's just a couple bad apples, or moments when Romans accidentally do something that really upsets everybody, is the way Josephus would put it. But obviously he has an agenda as well.
Not much to say about the theology of this imaginative scene, other than there might be, a little bit of a play here of preparation for what's going to come later. The emptiness of the temple is what struck me. As you say, the temple would have had a lot of gold, a lot of objects that the Romans or any other foreign power may have wanted, and yet it seemed like a little bit too empty. And also the weirdness, I think, of this culture was overemphasized in a probably not very good light. I thought the entrance of these troops at the temple court were making the temple look something more like a modern Buddhist temple, as opposed to something that would have been like an actual temple in the ancient world where sacrifices were made.
Right. Yeah. So that's a point I would make, is that even though they've made huge sets and they have lots of costumes, this is not a movie that is really focused on historical accuracy. This is not what Jerusalem looks like there. It is more, done in kind of a style of, or fanciful style kind of thing. And so it's interesting to see their choices on that. And in terms of the gold, I don't mean the gold would have been kept in the Holy of Holies where Pompey
Not in the
goes.
Holy of Holies.
But it would have been in the temple complex overall. So, all right. So then that sets off. Now we get to the narrator. The narrator says essentially the entire time the Romans are running around, more or less pillaging, enslaving all the Judeans. They're more or less just brigands, and that's going on nonstop the entire time, which is, like I say, not the case. And then it makes this this really remarkable claim that they couldn't find any Jewish leaders. The Romans couldn't find any Jewish leaders to install, and so they named Herod as the king of the Jews, the false king. The movie says, and then specifically it says that Herod is a Bedouin Arab. And
Right.
that is false. That is not history, So, so Herod is not a Bedouin. He's not an Arab. Herod is a Jew, but he is an Idumean, which is to say he is from the area that's just a little south of Judea, that in the Old Testament times we call Edom, or Idumea in the kind of the classical Greek version of that. And the Maccabees, the Hasmoneans, had expanded their kingdom during that brief period of Judean independence. They conquered Idumea and forcibly converted people, and so those Idumeans became of the same religion of the Judeans, and Herod is of mixed Judean Idumean ancestry, and anyway, so he's not an Arab.
And I wonder if that's either ignorance or intentional, or both, to show how the Herodians had no regard for the religion.
Yeah, but if so, that's again not history. So Herod does have regard for the religion because he, for example, rebuilds the temple, or builds it for the first time on a grand scale. So it becomes, what the ruins that exist today are from Herod.
So that's another good point. This wonderful temple that was just sacked by Pompey was not the temple of the temple of Herod.
Right, exactly. That would have been an earlier version of the Second Temple, presumably as the Maccabees had enlarged and increased, and
but they don't mention
than what happened.
that Herod did this expansion.
The big expansion of Herod, right? All right, so we go straight from there now. Finally, the narrator brings us to the Christmas story. So the birth of Jesus, there's Bethlehem, there's no room in the inn, all of that kind of a thing. And pretty quickly after, actually right away after they get into the stable, then we see the wise men show up. And so we have the three wise men. And this is like where we start to get to these great costumes in this movie, which I always feel, again, it's not the focus is historical accuracy, but rather it seems more like a stage play where they really want to have the most dramatic kind of what you'd think of as romantic costumes. But anyway.
I thought the same when the three of them appear. It's all this overload of visual information and colors and patterns that was a good contrast with the Lucan scene, which is everything happens in this humble, stable, dirty place, poor. Yes. The contrast between the kings and the humbleness of the whole set was actually very well done, that it made me think, this is really how crazy the Matthean account is. Just thinking that three important people would show up in a place like that is quite a statement, and the movie shows it. Even though they conflate or they collapse the Luke's and Matthew's account, that's fine. Most Christians do anyway. But I think was effective to show how crazy Matthew's account is, that three important people would show up in a place like this.
Yeah. Well, on the other hand, in Matthew's account, it's not a stable. In other words, we just assume that in Matthew's account, Joseph and Mary simply live in Bethlehem, and since Joseph is a descendant supposedly of the Davidic kings, he could be like a regular, not poor off guy. So in other words, it wouldn't have been in a stable in Matthew's account. It would have just been somebody's fairly reasonable house. And again, they're not kings. So three astrologers, three Persian priests show up to a regular middle-class guy's house, maybe. I don't know. I mean, it sort of, in bringing the accounts together, like you say, makes it really stark, because they're doing this thing, and it really does. And this is one of the occasions where this movie also then reminded me of The Life of Brian, which is filmed 18 years later, and clearly is looking at a movie like this one and some of the other movies like The Greatest Story Ever Told, and is parodying movies that are exactly like this, including this movie. And so that's probably also what's happening.
Now, the fact that he is proclaimed or identified as a great person by these three visitors, even though the two stories are collapsed into one, we don't get the Magnificat component of Luke, which is the posuit potentes and exaltavit humiles. So yes, here we're talking about a great king, but we don't say the counter narrative that comes from Luke, which is like elevate the humble and take down the powerful.
Right. So the shepherds were already there, but we don't hear anything from them, right? And in fact, actually, and so one of the choices that this movie makes is that anywhere it doesn't add angels, right? So if angels have told these shepherds to come here, the angels did so off screen. When Joseph is told by an angel to, abscond to Egypt, get out of here real quick, which does happen. He wakes up and tells Mary, someone told me this while I was asleep. I heard a voice.
That's happened in Scripture.
I know, but it says an angel appeared to him in a dream in Scripture. In other words, there's no talk of angels in this movie, and there's certainly no filmed angels. That's the choice that they're making, is to not show anything like that. And then one of the other things I think is so interesting about this is when the wise men come just ethereally in, like with so many things that happen that involve Jesus, Jesus is kind of just very tiny in the thing. You don't want to get too much picture of him. That anything that is happening like that, it almost becomes like pantomime. So suddenly nobody talks. They just walk forward, they give the thing, and they walk backwards, and they leave. And nobody says anything. And so it is kind of an interesting, I think that's an interesting theological choice, maybe, where they're trying to show something in this awe-inspiring way that isn't, it's surreal, it becomes. In other words, it's no longer even realistic in any way, because nobody's talking, it's made visually and musically.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's theological, because I'm not sure there's a theological statement that this choice of dramatization is doing, but it's definitely, it makes it look like a ritual.
Yeah. Well, I guess the only thing I meant about it was that high Christology, right? So they're emphasizing that something divine is here. This is not normal. We're not bringing this to human realism. This is something that's not inhuman is happening here, or weird.
But remind me, do they explain what the gifts are, or they just give the gifts inside these super fancy vessels?
They just give gifts inside the super fancy vessels. They say, the narrator talks, and the narrator says that it's Caspar has come from Mesopotamia, Melchior has come from Persia, Balthazar has come from Ethiopia. So you can see the different skin colors of the kings, and so the narrators giving those names are not in the Bible. The number 3 is not in the Bible. It's that's Christian tradition from later on that names the kings that, and so they're drawing on Christian tradition in order to have that. But like you say, the rest of it isn't mentioned, or the symbolism therefore of what the myrrh is, that kind of thing. Yeah, it's lost. So okay, so after the Christmas, the nativity scene, we cut to Herod's court. Herod and his court, this is one of the occasions, everybody who's in court, especially the Herodians, always have the most outlandish costumes. It's just great stuff. And so Herod the Great has got a great costume. He's talking to his astrologers, who again have great costumes and a big disc back there. So, he's asking them, what is there any, they hear this report about a new king being born. He's like, is there anything about that? And the guy's like, well, there's prophets, new prophets born every day. We can't worry about that. This is, everybody believes all this kind of thing. We also are introduced to two characters. One is the Roman commander, Lucius, and the other is Herod's son, Herod Antipas. And so after they debate what to do, it all automatically comes down to Herod the Great, who says, well, I guess we just have to massacre, all the boys in that town. You go do that, Lucius. Lucius is like, hey, I'm a Roman soldier. I'm not here to just, massacre babies. And he's like, well, Caesar told you to do anything I said, so we go do it. And he's like, okay, well, I guess I'll go do that. So Lucius goes off and massacres all the babies. But like we said, Joseph had this dream, and so they got away, but all the other babies got killed. Off screen. So this is a G-rated movie.
Yes. So there's a lot of things that are off screen. Do you think that's primarily for the rating?
Well, I mean, a massacre of babies is off screen for the ratings.
But yes, there's many other scenes of a certain implied violence that are not in the movie.
There is a bunch of battle scenes that they made it in, which are not graphic, but chaotic and I think kind of funny. I don't know, in other words. So anyway, so immediately after the massacre happens, then Herod the Great collapses. He's overcome. Presumably he's being punished by God, with a heart attack or something like that. And he calls to his son to help him up. And Antipas, Herod Antipas, who's going to be the new villain going forward, says essentially, well, Father, a king who cannot walk to his throne is no longer a king. And so he goes and sits on the throne. Now Herod Antipas is going to be the guy who's in charge. So that moves on to that. Okay. Narrator cuts. We go straight to Nazareth. I think we learned it.
I'm going to say something first. What really struck me about this, the beginning of the movie, is how the narrator is portraying itself as an evangelist. So it goes seamlessly from this imagined story that is not in scripture, that mixes a little bit of history and some points that the movie wants to make about Jesus, and eventually starts quoting the Bible. It eventually starts quoting exactly from Scripture. The Luke, the account of Luke, that I don't remember in English, but it's like the accounts that all the passions of Bach in German start with that, and that's what caught me. Like, okay, he went from his own creation to scripture, and it blended in very well. And I was shocked because that was well done, although it's like misleading. If you don't know what scripture and what is not scripture, you would assume that everything is reading from the Bible. Yeah,
you get Orson Welles to read it, and he can write 20 new commandments. You don't just have the 10 commandments, but there's a bunch of other things that he wants to put into people's heads. So yeah, exactly. We got a question from David Latour, and how many times in history has the temple been desecrated? After the first couple times, you'd think its reputation would have been tarnished, he says. So yeah, so we have for sure the desecration that happens with Antiochus the Fourth Epiphanes. We have the desecration that Pompey has, and then of course we have the destruction of it with the Romans under Titus in 70. And so I don't know that do we have any other stories of desecrating the temple in between that? So I mean, it's destroyed, obviously, the first temple. Yeah, the second temple we're talking about. So just maybe those 3 times, to my knowledge. Related question from K. Tempest Bradford. Is there anything in the Talmud or Jewish scholarship that addresses how Pompey went in the Holy of Holies and made it out alive? So we have, I don't think that's in, in terms of the Talmud and Jewish scholarship, I don't know the answer to that. I know that we have an account of it from, it's in Josephus. And so, like I said, the way he has it is he comes with his army. So he makes it out alive because he's occupying the city and he has total control over everything. And so I think that he's able to do it without he's in perfect safety the whole time because he's come in force, I think is how it happens. In terms of, unless you're meaning that why didn't God curse him the way that did Herod the Great here and make him die of a heart attack? Well, ultimately Pompey has a very regrettable fate for a Roman patrician where he loses the civil war fight with Caesar. He flees to Alexandria in Egypt, where the Egyptians think that they're going to get on Caesar's good side by executing him, and they give his head to Caesar, which does not please Caesar. So that's in Cleopatra, which we should also watch. All right. Okay, we cut now to Nazareth. We are now to, I think it's 12 years later, so now Jesus is 12 years old. And it's crazy. So we have our same, main Roman guy here, leader, Lucius. And Lucius has come up on horseback. He's got a scroll. Now his job is census taker. He says, hey, folks, I'm just doing the census. Now let's see. You're Joseph, huh? And you live here with your wife, Mary. And then, who's that boy? Where is he? I have no record of his birth. And they find out that, and Mary says, well, he's our son. He's born 12 years ago. Where was he born? Bethlehem. And that makes Lucius remember back 12 years ago when he massacred all these baby boys in Bethlehem. So that puts it in his head. And he's like, all right, well, move along. We're not going to, get him registered next year.
And I was struggling to accept this character of Lucius, right? Because it's like, where does it come from? But then I realized that this is a very important character. Like, who is this boy? So who is this Jesus? So this is a character who's trying to figure out who Jesus is the whole time. And I'm not going to say too much ahead of time, but there's a transformation that happens through this character. The character, I believe, is very intentionally developed to be like one of us.
Yeah.
Like a viewer who comes with no previous knowledge about the story and is experiencing the story as one of the characters, and through experiencing all these different encounters, because he's everywhere. Then we'll see what happens to him.
Well, yeah, no, I agree with you entirely. So Lucius is put in as essentially the everyman for the regular Joe in the United States, right? So this is an American movie for American audience. And so the American producers here have thought, well, everybody when you go into Jerusalem and there's all these Jewish people who are priests and things like that, they're clearly Jewish. They're different from the everyman who is a Christian, presumably, or secular American guy. And so the stand-in in the understanding of Hollywood, is this idea that Americans had that they're more or less the Romans, and so Americans in the 1960s are just the Romans, and so then when they come to a place like Judea, they're like, why do we have to be here? It's like the Americans having to go overseas to fight wars in places or something like that, and they're all, we don't want to be here in this kind of place, and they all have that opinion. So Pontius Pilate doesn't want to be there, Lucius doesn't want to be there, but Lucius is going around, and he is constantly portraying himself, like you say, he's like the person through which the audience, the everyman American guy audience, is supposed to be seeing the story, because he's also dubious about the religious stuff, the miraculous stuff. He's very skeptical and that kind of a thing. He's always approaching it that way. Yeah, interesting. Anyway, in terms of who is this boy? Also, he's there being a carpenter doing carpentry stuff. And a caravan guy comes up and says, well, let me take him with me in a caravan. I'd love to have a boy like that help me out. And Mary's like, nope, he's going to go somewhere. He's got a great destiny, but it's not to go off on a caravan. I know he'll leave me someday, but that's not to go with you. So we get all that kind of stuff. I took a screen cap of him, but he's again, always in these things, they're trying to show Jesus as little as possible at this point, before they reveal him. So. Okay, that fast forward us again. We get now to when Jesus would be about 30. So we didn't have any of the scene of, like, for example, Jesus going to the temple as a kid and confounding the elders. That's cut from the movie. and that kind of a thing. Instead,
Which I
Pontius
was
Pilate.
surprised.
What?
I was surprised that wasn't in the movie.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they choose what they want to put in, right? So they put in a bunch of stuff that they're writing from their own fan fiction, and then they're cutting a lot of stuff from the text, you know. So what we have happen is, again, we have this cast of thousands. Now they're all dressed as Roman legions. Pontius Pilate is leading them in a white outfit on the back of a chariot. He's arrived, and this is another thing that's happening. Even though they have all these costumes and things like that, if you're not at the big Jerusalem set, you're often just traipsing around the hills around LA or wherever this is, you know, because in other words, there's no road or anything like that. They're just in a field.
Absolutely nothing.
Yeah. Anyway, so here's Pontius Pilate. He's dressed more or less like an emperor, which is pretty wild. And he's married to a woman who is dressed like an empress, Pontius Pilate's wife, who in the movie is the daughter of Tiberius, the reigning emperor. So Pontius Pilate and his wife are like the ultra elite in this movie.
Yeah, and so you're the historian here, and I thought the producers, the director was trying to make Pontius Pilate a bigger deal than he was, but also Jerusalem and Judea a much bigger deal than it really was, by not only by sending them there, but by saying things like, you know, if you know how to rule Judea, you can rule Rome, so you can be the next emperor. That was a suggestion.
Yeah. So like again, her father gave him this province, and like you say, it's kind of like a New York. If I can make it there, I'll make it anywhere. If you can rule Judea, you can govern anywhere, even Rome, which is, you know, preposterous. So yeah, no. So Pontius Pilate is not, you know, part of the even senatorial elite. He's the next level down, I think, is an equestrian. In any event, he's the level of person, still a wealthy person from a class that the emperors make use of in order to have them be loyal to the emperors, right? So the immediate senatorial elite, these are people that feel they're too grand to be fully trusted by the emperors. And so sending them off to podunk provinces like Judea, they're sending people of this other class, certainly not dressed like this, certainly not married to the daughter of the emperor and that kind of a thing, part of the imperial family. So that is not, so the movie is changing that. Meanwhile, while these guys are in the middle of that field wandering around, they had to stop for water. The Romans all go off and go start drinking at a watering hole. Meanwhile, we find rebels in the hills who are watching them and preparing an ambush. And who are these two rebels, Leandro?
Well, I had no idea that Barabbas was friend of Judas.
Exactly. So it's Barabbas and
me.
Judas Iscariot, who are best buds. Barabbas is a rebel leader, and Judas Iscariot is his right-hand guy, played by a young Rip Torn. So it's a pretty interesting decision on the movie maker's part. And so they are waiting in to ambush the Roman reinforcements and Pontius Pilate as they come in. Also in the area here has come to see them. There's good old Lucius, who has been hanging out here in Palestine this whole time, in Judea this whole time, with Herod Antipas, who's now king. And again, Herod always has the best outfits with that hat and everything like that. And Herod has also brought a litter with his wife, Herodias, and her daughter, his stepdaughter. And so she is very much giving me, or this entire time, her makeup, her haircut, everything looks like Nefertiti from the Ten Commandments, who's the femme fatale, the wife of Pharaoh, the girlfriend of Moses in the Ten Commandments, who on the one hand starts out as maybe potentially Moses' potential girlfriend. By the end, she's really bitter and is the source of all the revenge and everything like that. Anyway, in terms of the Ten Commandments, she's also she's named Salome in this case, Herodias' daughter. And so now we're introduced to those characters, and now the ambush begins. And this is where there's like one of these chaotic fight scenes where people are just running around and charging down the hills. There's all these guys with slinging and throwing javelins, and the Romans start running around, firing, doing crazy things.
Really wild, the idea of using slings against the legion, but
yeah. And so in some of the fights, this is probably the most graphic thing, is where they actually stab somebody and lift him up in the air on a pylon here or something like that and throw him. But anyway, that's the kind of thing that happens. So the Romans are looking bad for them, but then reinforcements come, and they end up winning the battle, or at least Pilate ends up not getting. Pilate and all the leaders and everything like that anyway are able to arrive safely. Okay. Next, anything more to say about the battle? We're still good at going forward.
There's not a lot of theology in the battle.
Okay, yeah. So next we go straight to John the Baptist. John the Baptist is quoting Mark. He's doing fully clothed sprinkle baptisms with a lot of people around him. The people are asking him all of this dialogue. Are you the Messiah? Are you Elijah? All those kind of things, and he's quoting scripture back to them, back and forth. This is where the dialogue comes from. And then ultimately, Jesus comes and is baptized by him. And Mary, his mother, is there watching it. And so, let's see. One of the things that we see is then John the Baptist, we have many of these in this movie, like kind of instead of... So we don't have special effects miracles, and we don't see angels. Instead, when something divine is happening, we usually zoom in on the guy's eyes. And so John the Baptist kind of does this stare down with Jesus, and then suddenly we get like the Jesus eyes. And so the whole
and by the way,
here,
music
and all the music, yeah, exactly. So what we essentially have here is. What's this guy's name again? Jeffrey Hunter. Yeah, so Jeffrey Hunter, his most striking quality in this movie is these super blue eyes, and indeed one of the producer of the movie said that he cast him because of the eyes. He wanted to be able to do these eye shots, and so
Jesus had blue eyes, right? So.
Oh, exactly, of course. So, anyway, so the baptism scene. Do you want to? Do you have anything thoughts on that?
No, but something that you said before made me think of this. Salome and all the Herodians are, I think, deliberately portrayed as these degenerate, exuberant, Oriental royalty.
Yep.
To contrast that depravity of those evil people with the humbleness of the good ones. So in this scene especially that happen one after another, there's really a big contrast there. But then the shocking thing to me was that how this very important scene that we get in the Gospels about the life of Jesus is almost like an afterthought. And as you say, everything is just the eyes. Yeah. And then we move on, and then the Spirit doesn't come here.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's very interesting, their decision to do that. I agree with you entirely about the Orientalizing. In other words, Hollywood has this history of doing that where whenever you're going to have the Jewish leaders who are, they're like Herod, the Herodians, they are really represented. They're kind of like dressed as like Persians always,
right?
As opposed to they're Hellenistic kings, right? And so presumably would look like Greeks, if anything,
Like
and so
Greeks.
And so this is always done. That's just the convention that happens. So.
And they also have this thing that it actually is, there are some Bible background to it of representing the queens and all the women
Yes.
of the royal courts as they're really, really evil.
Right.
Whereas men are these effeminate rulers that are weak
Right.
and they're totally controlled by their women. And so it's really the women who are doing all these evil things. And the guys are just, they're just listening to them and doing whatever they want.
Yep. And so we'll have a lot of that in this course of this film. So after the baptism, there is a very weird, what I call fan fiction scene that they've put in, Bible fan fiction. It's, a scene from this because it doesn't happen anywhere in the Bible, where John the Baptist comes and visits Mary. And, got to find out more about Jesus by talking to Mary. And once again, Mary, gives the idea that there's big destiny role here that is happening for Jesus. And so that gets John the Baptist kind of feeling, getting him more on board, I guess, with all of this. We then go back to the narrator. Oh,
there's one thing about, there's something very important about that. They have a table.
Oh, yeah.
They have a table, and this table has chairs.
So yeah, exactly. That's true. So in the Mel Gibson movie that we did before, Jesus invents the modern table and chairs. Everybody else, and that's true here. They've got the kind of modern table and chairs, whereas all the Romans decadently are, and also the Herodians in this movie are all reclining, and they're just constantly reclining, and it makes them look very decadent compared to these wholesome people that have a regular table and chairs, like the good carpenters here in Nazareth.
Maybe that's where Mel Gibson got the idea of letting the table.
Maybe so. So the narrator then takes us to Jesus in the desert. Satan is just a voiceover in this as he's tempted and wanders around and so on, and again shows off his blue eyes. At a certain point, some of this part where he's wandering around all by himself in the backlot of Los Angeles, where wherever this is, it's the same kind of place where they film Star Trek when they go out into the actual on location planets, and so I feel like this is like Captain Pike, wandering around a desert planet for a certain point, or at least I was seeing that, since he's the guy who plays the pilot, the captain in the original Star Trek pilot as well. So,
but what struck me is that the Spirit that is supposed to come during baptism actually comes here in the desert, which is, I've been thinking about why the choice. It's almost like Jesus had to go through this mystical journey in order for the Spirit to enter Jesus, not at baptism, but it is almost like having I wonder if they're trying to do like this experience of like pietism. You have to be born again. So baptism doesn't really count. Like even Jesus has to have a born again experience here. Excuse me. And that's when actually he receives the Spirit, which is very pietist.
And potentially adoptionist, right? In that he's suddenly this is where he becomes the really ethereal Jesus at this point, huh?
Potentially, yes. We are we have a heresy here.
All right. Well, Jesus comes back and immediately begins calling disciples. The first two he gets are from John the Baptist, which includes John the Beloved and Andrew. John just sends them off to follow Jesus. Then they go immediately and meet Peter, who's just a simple fisherman, and Jesus says he'll make him a fisher of men and that kind of thing, and changes his name to Peter. Simon has been his name, and so that's all included in this. So Peter's the third disciple to be called in this order. Then we go back to Jerusalem. Pilate has arrived. He's there with Lucius. Lucius has just been hanging out, and Pilate's like, hey, I noticed There's no statues, there's no medallions, there's no images of the emperor anywhere. And Lucius is like, yeah, well, that's against Jewish law. It would make everybody real mad at us if we would do that. But Pilate's like, well, fortunately, I brought a whole stack of these medallions, these whole plaque. I got a whole crate full of plaques. We're going to put them up everywhere on the temple.
He doesn't seem to be a very knowledgeable guy, this Pilate.
No. So the plaques are just like oversized coins, and they just start hanging them everywhere. Anyway, and so we cut and we see John the Baptist is outside the temple. Everybody's all mad because there's these plaques on the temple now. And he's condemning it. We go to the court of Herod and Pilate. All of the elite are here, including Herodia and her daughter and Pilate's wife and so on. They're holding court in Jerusalem, and they can hear all the yelling from outside while it's happening. They're all just hanging out, reclining, having wine, talking wryly to each other, and so on. They have great costumes again, Herod here. And also we have the high priest who is here with them. So like I say, John is out there condemning them for putting these plaques on the side of the temple. And so they decide, well, I guess we got to go arrest him. So they, actually the women all say that Herod won't arrest him because he's scared of him, because he thinks he's a real prophet. And so he gets goaded into it. That's the thing that you're talking about. Like where the women are the ones that are saying, well, you're weak, effeminate men, and they are the ones that are actually goading him into doing things, that he's reluctant to do because he's afraid. And so anyway, they do catch him, and so Lucius goes and arrests him, and so then John the Baptist comes and personally has some one-on-one yell-downs with them, including specifically calling Salome a daughter of adultery because her mother had been married to Herod's brother before that guy got killed, and Herod has now married her. And that puts him in prison. So anyway, they have him put in prison. She's mad at him. That starts Salome having an enemy making an enemy of John the Baptist. All right, so we cut to Jesus. We can tell because there's those blue eyes.
Nice.
We now switch from calling disciples to a series of miracles that Jesus does. But again, these are done without really special effects. There's kind of like a guy writhing on the ground, and he sort of stops writhing. Essentially, there's a bunch of shadows that are over top of it.
Right.
Jesus is casting shadows. We zoom in on his eyes whenever he's kind of healing people. Those perfect blue eyes of Jesus here are healing everybody, and so on.
It's interesting, the choice. It's almost like throughout the movie, they try not to show anything supernatural. There's no, as you said, there's no angels. And here, these accounts of miracles, you don't really see the miracle, you see a shadow.
Right.
And the director is very aware of the concept of light and darkness in the Gospel of John, because that's mentioned several times in the movie. And so here the lights and shadows are used in these moments when a miracle happens. Now, if you don't know the story, if you don't know the accounts of these miracles, you probably would not understand what is going on.
Right.
So here there's a lot of subtleness that assumes the viewers know what's going on. But we know it's a miracle because we know we have read or heard scripture, but it's not portrayed in the movie itself. So
but it will be explained in exposition later. So in other words,
yes.
if you've missed it, if you haven't read it, they're going to say it. You just don't know what's going on right now, other than he's got crazy blue eyes, right? And shadows and that kind of thing. So I think maybe the narrator's saying it too. Talking about healing and things like that. But anyway,
these are miracles,
talking about it.
It's talking about it. It's not showing
it. I agree with you entirely. Yeah. So there's the blind guy. His eye. The only thing you see is his eye is glazed over, and then the next time you come back and we look at him when the shadows emerge from him, then suddenly his eye is not like that, right? So then after the healing parts, after the miracles on and off screen or however they're done, we just have this kind of casual, Jesus is hanging out in Jerusalem with his disciples. They're like, hey, tell me what the parable of the sower means. I don't get that one. This is kind of like casual talk. That's the kind of thing that presumably they're wandering around doing all the time. And then suddenly a mob is running after this woman, and Jesus stops and confronts the mob, asks them what they're doing. They're saying, this is a woman, she's been found in adultery. And Jesus does whoever is you without sin, cast the first stone, disperses the mob. And one of the people that's watching him while he does this is our friend Judas, the friend of Barabbas, the partner of Barabbas in terms of the rebellion. Now he's interested in all the things that Jesus has been doing. He's been watching all of this stuff.
And so, again, Judas is impressed by Jesus' courage, because there's no real miracle,
right?
As in a supernatural miracle,
right,
that takes place in this scene of Judas's conversion of sorts.
Yes. And the other character that it introduces then is the woman taken in adultery, which is conflated with Mary Magdalene. And so now this character from the Gospel of John becomes Mary Magdalene, who we're now introduced to. Okay, we cut to Lucius, our friend Lucius. He's in a lot of these things. So Lucius has, had arrested John the Baptist, and he's now got him in his prison, and he's sitting having dinner, and Jesus shows up and says, hey, I want to visit John the Baptist. Well, nobody's allowed to visit John the Baptist. And he says, well, I want to visit him. And Lucius is like, who are you? And he gets his lamp out to look at him, and he sees he's Jesus, and he says he's from Nazareth. That rings a bell for Lucius. He actually recognizes him essentially as the 12-year-old kid that he'd met during the census taking duty 18 years ago, and equates him with the kid that didn't get killed in Bethlehem when he massacred all of the kids in Bethlehem, all the babies in Bethlehem. And so he's like, all right, I guess I'm going to let you talk to John the Baptist, considering all this stuff.
I already messed up, so still on.
I guess I let you give you a lot of passes, kid. I'm going to let you do this too. And so
what else can go wrong?
What could go wrong? So we have a fanfic scene between Jesus and John the Baptist. And I say fanfic in terms of the Bible. That's not in the Bible, but it's now a scene here. And so John clambers up the side of his thing so that he can touch Jesus before. I don't know. Anyway, that's what happens in the movie. All right. So we now cut back to Jesus and the disciples. They're going back to Nazareth. And Judas joins up, and he's like, hey, let me follow you. I want to be one of your merry band.
Yeah. That's when we learn who he is.
What?
That's when we learn who he is.
Oh, yeah. Well,
his character is.
Has he not been named before?
Well, if he did, I missed him. I missed it.
Yeah. So now we know. Now he introduces himself. His name is Judas.
I think he is introduced here because of the music is telling us that there's some new information here.
Yeah, yeah. Well, again, often was Jesus is wandering around. This ethereal, otherworldly, inhuman Jesus music. There's all kinds of crazy things happening. Crowds are running after Mary Magdalene and things like that. But then, and there's lots of crazy music when that happens. But then when Jesus is walking around, it's all very ethereal. Anyway, after Mary Magdalene goes to visit Mary, Mary gets a lot more screen time in the movie than in the Bible. And, she, even though Mary Magdalene introduces herself as a sinner, Mary is very happy to have her share table, and she quotes the parable of the lost sheep to Mary Magdalene, and they two start getting along.
That was good to hear the parable in out of Mary's mouth.
Yeah. Okay, we cut to Pilate's court. This is where exposition happens. So you're wondering where it talks about that there were miracles or not. The Romans have just insane intelligence reporting on everything Jesus has been doing. He's like, Jesus first got two disciples off of off of John the Baptist, and then he got another one who was a fisherman, and then he went and did this. I mean, it's like they've got like a spy who's doing every single thing. He healed these people. He fed 5,000. He walked on water. He calmed storms. And so anyway,
they do have like they probably had the science gospel.
Yeah, exactly. And so as Pontius Pilate is hearing all this stuff out of the report, he says, "I've never heard such absolute nonsense. It's ridiculous." So he's the skeptic, and Lucius says, "Well, that's how it's reported." So
it says so here
yeah.
in our little testament, in a little gospel that we have here.
Our little scroll that our little Roman spies are giving us. And then Lucius, once he realizes, wait a second, there's a lot of miracles happening in this associate, he remembers all this history he has with Jesus. So he goes to talk to John the Baptist to find out, wait a second, is this Jesus guy? There's now these miracles. He's starting to put a couple pieces together. So this is Lucius's path going forward, right? So we continue with this crazy court. Oh, there's Lucius reading the scrolls. Anyway, we continue with the crazy court. Again, Herod is orientalized, effeminate, weak guy, super drunk. His wife is really mad at him. He's trying to goad his stepdaughter into dancing for him and he wants her to ask as a favor that he gets rid of her mother and makes her his queen. And so he keeps on saying that he wants her to pick that. Anyway, ultimately, he promises that he'll give her anything she asks if she dances for him, so she does. And of course, when that dance ends, she asks for the head of John the Baptist. She's been mad at him ever since he called her a child of adultery, and so on. And so Herod realizes, well, he vowed in front of everybody, including the Romans, so he's got to do it. And so even though he didn't want to, he has orders that John the Baptist's head be cut off. And right as John is in prison praying, he hears Jesus' voice, I think, to him, more or less affirming everything. And then with a big Saracen sword, his head is lopped off.
Yeah, and here we see this also very biblical thing about once you give the word, you gave your word, and you have to keep your promise.
Well, this is also, that's in the Bible, I mean, but it's also...
but not in this scene. Like, I'm just talking about Jacob, right? Or, even like the patriarchs. Like this probably echoing that kind of importance of the word. So Herod Antipas is this wicked, effeminate, oriental monarch, but he is a man of his word.
Yeah, once you've sworn that you do a thing and you give a boon, this is just a trope of antiquity, right? So this is the same thing that happens in Greek mythology. Helios, the sun god, is visited by his son, Phaeton, and Phaeton, he says, well, I love you so much, son, I'll give you anything you ask. And Phaeton asks, well, I want to drive the chariot of the sun, across the sky. And of course, as a mortal, he can't control the horses. And so they escape and fall down. He's horribly killed, and the sun scorches Ethiopia, and that's why people there are black to this day, and so forth. In other words, an ideological myth, but it has in the center of it that thing where a king rashly gives a boon and says, I'll do anything you ask, and then someone asks for a thing that you shouldn't ask for, and then that causes everything to be bad. And that is in the biblical account. So
in that way, the Herodians are Hellenistic, but only in that way.
Yeah. All right, so that's the end of John the Baptist. Cut to Pilate. Pilate is doing the same kind of thing, again, where we're talking to Lucius, where the Romans are Americans. They don't want to be in these horrible foreign places. All Rome wants is peace and taxes. I don't want to spend the rest of my life in this miserable country. Pontius Pilate says, we got to find out what's going on with this Jesus guy. So he sends Lucius on a spy mission. Lucius does everything. He is a one-man Roman army. He's the census guy. He goes and arrests John the Baptist. He's the jail keeper. He's the guy who has to go massacre the babies. Lucius does everything. Anyway, so he's got to dress up and go spy on Jesus, even though they've got great spies. So we go to the Sermon on the Mount scene, and it's just just a crazy, again, amount of people all dressed up with camels and goats and all kinds of fun animals. And there, in addition to Lucius, is Pilate's wife, who has decided that she wants to find out more about what's going on personally herself. And like I say, Lucius, who is in disguise. So nobody would recognize him at this point. And we have the Sermon on the Mount. And so again, we have this really otherworldly Jesus. We have this music. We have the cast of thousands. And then we have this kind of crazy best of Jesus quotes all edited together, including people yelling out questions at him and him answering with great quotes from the Bible and so on.
It is the Sermon of the Mount plus.
Right, that's right.
So there's parables, there's all sorts of things that are not in the Sermon of the Mount, but it's all encapsulated as one, like the Jesus's best hits.
Yes.
At moment. And but he's, even though there's this, like, they really got a lot of extras for this, and yet he's talking at people like normal volume, right? He's not like talking like with preaching voice.
That's right. And so yeah, those people that are way on the distant side of the other hill, they cannot possibly be hearing what he's saying here. But maybe he's doing the whole crowd. He's making the rounds and talking to everybody eventually.
Well, he is constantly walking through the crowds, and people are going to ask this or that. But yeah, you really have to run behind him to listen, and like each person listens to a different part of the gospel.
Yeah. So let's take as we're here at this point, why don't we take some of the comments and questions, because we're getting past some of them. So. Want to thank Fire Ever Living for your support, and also Natural Philosophy for your support. Natural Philosophy says, I really enjoy the idea of Barabbas as a freedom fighter rather than just some random murderer guy. It makes the story more believable to me. Is there any way that this is plausible even a little bit? So do you remember what, so Barabbas is in the Matthew story more or less just to be there as as someone to have the crowd release, right? And so the gospel writer creates maybe in Mark as well. Anyway, the evangelists create a tradition that's on the Passover, the Romans release one prisoner, depending people in the crowd yell out. There's no. This is not a likely tradition.
There's no real, no evidence for that.
There's no evidence for that. That's not something that is mentioned, for example, in Josephus. And it's not a good administrative thing to do, because you could always get caught. It's the same kind of thing that you don't want to do, like say, I'll give you up to half my kingdom, I'll give you anything I ask, and you swear it, and then they ask for John the Baptist's head, and you get in trouble or whatever. This is the saying you'll release any prisoner is a mess. That's not something you want to do anyway. And also it's almost certainly a literary fiction of the author because of the name that Barabbas has, which is son of the father, right? Or son of in Aramaic, Bar Abba.
Bar Abba.
And so, as a result of that, there's not a historical figure that we're aware of, Natural Philosophy. So I think that as such, when you make a more elaborate fan fiction like this, you can make the character into whoever you want him to be, because it's probably a literary creation to begin with. All right, Tim says, I think that they're trying to imply that the narrator Orson Welles is Josephus. That's interesting. So yeah, he definitely goes into quoting scripture at different times, and I think that's why Leandro had this sense of him being the
narrator sounds to me more like when the gospel narrators are speaking, as opposed to Josephus. He doesn't read. It doesn't sound like the voice of Josephus, even when he's. So when he's recounting history, quote unquote history, he uses the same voice that the evangelists use, and that's why I think that was well done. I think, but not so much as Josephus, but actually maybe yes, maybe they were
Maybe
trying
it's
to do
Josephus
that.
for the beginning part about Pompey, and
Yeah.
that's interesting. That's an interesting take on it. Ricky Palacios asks, would you call the Gospel of Mark a passion narrative with an extended introduction? You certainly, I guess, could make that case because a third of the action takes place in the week of Easter, and in some ways is meant to be the lead up to it, and that's just true for all of the Gospels, and so that's certainly one way to look at it. Yeah. Where were we? K. Tempest Bradford. How many people were there at the Sermon on the Mount according to the Gospels? A multitude, I think.
A multitude.
so I think that.
But big enough that you would have to be speaking with a loud voice, with your preacher's voice, probably not the way that is portrayed in this movie.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, and I don't think that this is the place where only place where we get numbers in terms of multitude is the feeding of the multitude when we're talking about the feeding of the 5,000 and so on, the different feeding numbers that are given, and sometimes those are described as 5,000 men plus women and children or something like that. So it's a lot more than 5,000. So the idea is in the thousands in terms of when that multitude happens. Presumably, a multitude at the Sermon on the Mount is a lot of people as well. Didn't they separate the loaves and the fishes on the Sermon on the Mount team? Startharama asks. I don't think they did do that. I didn't observe it in the movie. Maybe if they were doing that, I wasn't watching it as closely as I should have. But they talk about it in the police report, the spy report.
In the police report, yes.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, when I saw the multitude in the film, I first thought, oh, here's the miracle of the loaves and fishes. But then no, it was the Sermon of the Mount. But I don't think there's the two are conflated there.
Yeah, I don't think there was, because I think we would have very clearly seen the fish and things like that if they'd done it. The movie is like, as we've said a couple times, is trying to avoid doing anything that overtly supernatural thing is shown, right? So they'll just do kind of a shadow and light, right?
But that's an interesting point, Dartorama, because there's a conflation between Sermon of the Mount and parables, but I don't think that of Sermon of the Mount and miracles.
Yeah. Zorak says, my take is when they showed the Jews being lined up and javelined, the dead Jews dropping into a pile of bodies at the start, it felt like it was a reaction to the Holocaust of the 20th century and also the establishment of the State of Israel, both of which had only happened a few decades before. And so it may well be, yeah. So here's the Romans, Pompey specifically, because the bad Romans are killing Jews off and desecrating their temple and destroying the land, which happens then for the next, up until Pontius Pilate comes. That may well be the context. That's interesting to think of that in terms of the context of when the movie was made, for sure. Dartharama says, this was definitely one of the least anti-Semitic Jesus movies. Yeah, so I think so too. I mean, compared to The Passion of the Christ,
Jewish, Jesus and the disciples are very Jewish, for the most part.
Well, Jesus got, anyway, pretty blue eyes, but Near East. Yes.
With the exception that most of these people are not ethnically Jewish. But I'm saying, but what they do and how they're portraying their culture and everything else is like we don't have that separation of the Gospel of John where the narrator is talking about the Jews as someone else.
Yes. Natural Philosophy also said, I actually enjoyed the lack of the divine presence seen in the movies. In other words, shearing it of the miracles and having it be more the message is appealing to Natural Philosophy. And Dartharama liked that Mary seems to know what's going on all the whole time. So yes, she's definitely got in a sense this whole time that Jesus has a big destiny, even if she's not entirely knows what it is. Usually she's portrayed as so holy that she's not human, but Dartharama finds this portrayal to be more human. So that's interesting. Okay, from the Sermon on the Mount, we make our way back to Jerusalem, where Lucius, still wearing his spy clothes, has come to report to Pilate, who is hanging out with Herod in the bath. Don't have a picture of that, but in any event, Nicodemus then comes, and Nicodemus is another spy. In this case, he's spying for the Jewish High Council, and so he comes back and reports to Caiaphas, the high priest. Nicodemus is one of the elders that on the council that visits Jesus in the Gospel of John. And so that's where that character comes from. That leads us all up to, we go back to Judas, who comes back and is hanging out with Barabbas. Oopsie. Like I accidentally pressed the off button on this. I don't know if you can, do you know how to make this turn back on in terms of slides?
Yeah, and I like the fact that we have Nicodemus here, because the movie seems to take the gospel accounts quite literally. And Nicodemus was the one that in the Gospel of John doesn't understand what Jesus is trying to say, because he is thinking that everything that Jesus says is to be taken literally. Like, am I supposed to go back to my mother's womb?
To be born again.
It is a little bit of an irony there that a director that takes everything literally, it uses Nicodemus in this scene.
Yeah, well, interesting. And so, like I said, now Judas comes back to Barabbas. Barabbas has also become a major character in this, as everybody's kind of pointing out. So in addition to like the new character of Lucius, the other character that really gets an increased role in this movie is Barabbas. They're busy at having an underground armory where they're making all of the swords. Judas is now trying to convince Barabbas, man, we really need to team up with Jesus, because he's got something going on. He's got the people behind him, but Barabbas is like, I'm fire, he's water. Anyway, they all agree that on this upcoming day before the Passover, everybody's coming to Jerusalem. Jesus is going to have all his followers there, and the Barabbas and everybody, they all decide they're going to go there too, and that's when they're going to have their big rebellion. And that brings us to the intermission, which is more than halfway through the movie. But anyway, it's again one of these Hollywood epics, and so therefore it has this whole intermission with, again, another whole musical treatment and all that kind of thing. We make our way back. Lucius, again, they've got, Lucius is not the only spy, obviously, because he also is getting lots of reports. They've got great reports. So Lucius warns Pilate, and Pilate's wife that, Barabbas is he's got one of the swords here that Barabbas has been making. They know Barabbas is going to try to have a big revolution and everything like that. So in other words, the Romans are ready for this because they have an incredible, Roman CIA that's working on it. Meanwhile, before going to Jerusalem, Jesus goes and visits Mary. Mary, once again, who has this foreknowledge of everything, realizes, he says, well, I've got to finish that table that I've been working on. She's like, you're never finishing the table. You're never coming back. I'm going to come to Jerusalem with you. So she knows what's going on. So he's like, okay, whatever. So we all go to Jerusalem. And of course, this is the Palm Sunday. Jesus shows up on a donkey, and everybody starts throwing the palm fronds down. There he is riding in. The Romans are just sitting around watching all these crazy Judeans and so on. Meanwhile, Barabbas and all his guys are in the crowds, and they have been smuggling weapons into the city, and they decide that this is the best moment to begin their rebellion. And so then they have one of these, again, the most chaotic fighting scenes of the whole movie, right? So once again, everybody's got weapons, they're all running around, everybody's got great costumes on and things like that, and they all start stabbing each other in a frenzy. But the Romans are very ready at this point. So they've got all the high ground, they've got all the archers, they're shooting everybody. And you can see how the set, right? So this is a crazy set. it's fanciful, but it's fun. And there's like just a big bunch of chaotic battle going on as the Romans are kind of killing all the rebels. The rebels are trying to kill some people. They're ramming the Roman positions. The Romans are able to more or less push them back. Pontius Pilate signals, okay, now we're going to kill them all. And so then the Romans take out their band, and they got kettle drums and cymbals. You know that you're going to win. And now they start killing them on the beat. Smash, smash, smash. And here come the Romans, and they just massacre everybody. And that's the end of Barabbas's rebellion.
Now, what's really crazy about this scene is that the Palm Sunday, the entrance of Jesus in Jerusalem, that is a major event in the story of Jesus.
Yeah.
It's like an afterthought because most of the time of this scene is dedicated to the battle.
Yeah. It took a lot for me to get like these two screenshots, because I kind of wanted to have the people with the palm fronds and Jesus on the donkey, and you really can't have both in the same thing, in the same screenshot, because it goes by so fast. Yeah. And mostly what's happening
really only sets the massacre in time. That only indicates, when Jesus entered Jerusalem, then
that's the occasion when there's this entire giant massacre and fight, and of course and all of this is non-biblical. So this is all and non-historical. This is all just the invention of the movie maker. And so Barabbas is caught and imprisoned. Judas goes and visits with the last of the rebels that are hiding out now underground in the old lair, and he tells them he knows that Jesus could overthrow the Romans in a second, because he has all these magic powers, and he will be able to call down fire on the Roman garrison and everything like that. And the other rebels are like, but he never does that. He only preaches peace. He only heals people. He never. You keep on saying he's going to blow up all these Romans, but he doesn't do that. And Judas is like, I'm gonna make him do it. I'm gonna get him to do it, and so on. And so that cuts.
This is something really interesting that is revealed in this scene here.
Yeah.
So what's revealed here is that Judas' intention is actually, from his perspective, is good.
Yeah.
So Judas actually wants to help Jesus's cause by saying, well, when Jesus is really in trouble, then he will use his superpowers to save himself and all of us. That's when he's going to just overcome the Romans. So just by pushing Jesus to do these situations where he actually has to use the powers, we can probably expedite the whole thing.
Yeah, it's an interesting, weird take on the Judas character, by putting him into this entire plot story, which is a pretty significant part of the movie, of all of the rebels and being Barabbas' friend and all that kind of thing. So it's an interesting take on it, or a backstory and motivation for the Judas character. All right, we cut to the Last Supper. There's Jesus with the disciples. There he is with John the Beloved. He predicts that one of them is going to betray him. And, we get one of the stare downs that he does with Judas. So we know pretty much which one it is. And then immediately after he mentions it, and there's the stare down, Judas leaves. And that's when we have the introduction of the communion. So the breaking of the bread and the wine. So in other words, not with Judas. Which is a change. And that's maybe a theological change.
Well, the theology of this scene also builds up on what came before, Judas revealing what his intentions are.
Yeah.
Now, in this exchange between Jesus and Judas that takes place, according to the movie, before the breaking of bread and sharing the wine, comes from the Gospel of John, where Jesus says, what you must do, do it quickly,
Yes.
right? And so that indicates not only that Jesus already knew what Judas was about to do, but then opens the question, well, is it really essential now? Is it really something that we are taking? Yes, Judas is convinced that he's going to do something great, something very good by doing this. And Jesus says, yeah, go do it quickly, because now it's not the outcome is not going to be what Judas thinks, but he has to do it. And so I think there's in a way, just picturing Judas in very sympathetic light. Yes, he was ignorant. He thought the whole thing is about a king as an earthly king. Yeah. And he wants to help that king. He doesn't want to betray the king. He wants to help, but then because he doesn't understand, something else happens.
Yeah. I think it's also, this is also what you bring up also is this point that happens when you combining the synoptic gospel accounts with John, and you're just going back and forth and just taking quotes from the one and the other and the actions from the one and the other. The problematic portrait that comes out of it is in the Gospel of John, everything that Jesus does is totally in control. He is the divine Christ that is always in control of everything that's happening, even when the soldiers are coming to get him. He's the one who's allowing that to happen. Whereas it's a much more human portrayal in, let's say, Mark and things like that. And when you go right from one to the other like this, then that you have this kind of strange picture, because we have to decide, is Jeffrey Hunter Jesus here, blue-eyed Jesus, is he continuously ethereal and in command of everything and having foreknowledge of everything? But then why is he why does he get kind of emotional and frustrated and throw himself on the ground at different places? In other words, he's both in this movie, because you take two different visions of the character and combine them together without maybe coming up with your own new version of it as an insight.
Yeah, which is something that we've also seen when we explored the movie The Passion of the Christ. There's like an indiscriminate use of all four Gospels together just to serve a narrative or a point that the director wants to make. But here, yes, like the weak Jesus and the Jesus that is completely in control, we go back and forth, and it's almost like you are portraying someone who is going through some kind of mental health episodes, and it goes back and forth.
All right, so after the Last Supper, we cut to the garden where Jesus is praying. There is a very dramatic prayer as old Blue Eyes stares up in heaven and then groans and falls to the earth in pain. And Judas shows up with a whole bunch of troops and torches and ultimately betrays Jesus with a ethereal kiss. And there he is. So that moves then to, interestingly, so we don't follow Jesus now. Now the action follows Peter, and we go to Peter sitting outside, the courtroom and things like that, and we get these denials that Peter starts making that were predicted in the Last Supper, denying that he knows Jesus and so on. That's not me. I'm not one of the disciples. And by the way, the rooster is crowing. After he does it the first time, it crows. I'm like,
the first time. Yes.
I would have remembered after the first time once I heard the rooster, but he continues to do it. And in the way this movie happens, they actually take Jesus out. They take him right to Peter, and then Peter denies him to his face in the movie. This is the part where I'm like, I was watching this by myself, and I was like, this is crazy. Yeah. And I wanted to yell, say, Leandro, are you seeing this? So
I saw that.
So Jesus stares at him, and he's like, you're denying me to my face? That's not how the story goes. In other words, it's that Peter's doing it because he's not aware of what he's doing. In other words, he's just in conversation with regular people. And so that's one of the reasons why casually he's doing like everyone does, which is telling little lies that he doesn't think are important. And then later the cock actually crows, the rooster crows, and then he's like, oh, then he's like, ah, but it's not to his face. So anyway, so that is a little
Yeah,
different.
and so that's why it's a really strange thing, and I cannot even begin to understand what they were trying to do with this scene because there's that component of, I would say, irony and cowardice in Peter. So
Yeah,
Judas is supposed to betray, although in this movie it's not clear that Judas betrays. He's participant. And then Peter denies. That's what Peter does. He doesn't betray, but denies. But now, if you deny someone in someone's face, that's a betrayal. So Peter's denial he is unconscious when he does it in the Gospels. So he's
right.
telling you, "Oh no, I don't know Jesus. I don't know Jesus. I don't know Jesus." And then oh, what have I done? And when he understands that he did that's when he
Right.
starts crying.
Exactly.
But here he does it in Jesus's face. That's a betrayal. So that's the play between the betrayal of Judas and the denial of Jesus is totally lost here by doing this.
I agree. It was amazing. Okay. Well, that cuts us now to the Pilate before Jesus before Pilate scene. Pilate has this great red carpet that he walks on as he comes up to the dais. Jesus maintains his silence, even keeps his eyes closed through a lot of this trial. Pilate has one of his plaques that he loves so much, and he's conducting the trial himself. And of course, Lucius is there because Jesus will not talk. Pilate says, well, I'm going to therefore appoint Lucius to be your court-appointed advocate. Lucius tries to confer with Jesus. Jesus won't talk. So then the trial starts to be, Pilate just kind of making kind of crazy charges, and then Lucius starts speaking on behalf of Jesus, and they start arguing with each other, and it is kind of a crazy thing, because Jesus won't talk. And so then these two are just kind of having this argument, which is also not really obviously biblical or historical. I don't know. It's an interesting idea.
Yeah, it is like all of a sudden Jesus has a lawyer.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And then, by the way, his lawyer is the spy and the guy who runs the troops and the jail and massacres the infants and everything. He's got a lot of jobs. So Lucius. Anyway, then at a certain point, Jesus does start talking because he's being asked if he's a king and stuff like that. My kingdom is not of this world. Oh, you are a king. You said it. That kind of thing.
Because that's the point of the movie, right? King of Kings. That's when he starts talking.
Yeah. And so then that gets us to Pilate saying things, like at a certain point, his famous line, "What is truth?" And then Lucius is like, "Hey, come on, truth is not on trial." Oh, that's an ironic thing, right? Because obviously if Jesus is truth, in any event, then after the end of this whole thing, this trial that they have, which is more or less Lucius and Pilate arguing with each other, and occasionally Jesus chiming in to say that, he's not, I don't know, that you said he's a king, not him, that kind of thing. Then we get to this weird part, like it's not in any of the other Gospels, but it is in Luke, where Pilate's like, oh, he's a Galilean. I'll send him to Herod. Galilee is Herod's kingdom. And so then they send him to Herod. And I'm like, they're going to send him to Herod? Okay. Well, so then he goes to Herod. And once again, one last time, we get to have Herod's incredible orientalized court. And Herod has the best outfit. Herod and his wife have the best outfits that they have all movie. Just crazy stuff. Herod's wife has a very crazy outfit. Anyway, Herod this entire time continues thinking that Jesus is John the Baptist brought back to life. And his wife is like, look at him. It's not John the Baptist. Stop saying that. But anyway, he's obsessed with that. And then he's like, well, if you're the Messiah, then you can, I've heard you do all these miracles. Well, why don't you turn this little clay pot into gold? That's a little miracle. You could easily do that. He's trying to get him to do that kind of a miracle, but it's not happening. And so when he doesn't have his way, he slaps a red robe on him and sends him back to the Romans.
And I Yeah, I thought this could be, since there's so much artistic liberty taken in this movie, that at that point I thought it was going to be like echoing the temptations in the desert, but
Oh
it
yeah,
didn't quite happen.
yeah. I mean,
That
I
would
don't
have
think.
been a good theological thing to do. I mean, yes, we understand this is not scripturally or historically accurate, but
Yeah.
can you, by doing that, it's not that it's wrong to add your own ideas, but I'm having trouble understanding what is the agenda. Like when you have a gospel, agenda maybe is a word that sounds has a negative connotation, but there's something that the gospel writers is trying to say. Usually the gospel writers are not just writing history, but they have an idea in mind of who Jesus is, and everything they write in their gospels is serves the theological proposition that they're trying to make about Jesus, whereas it's very unclear what the theological proposition,
Well,
if any, is in this movie, other than he's a great king because, well, look, we put all the things together from all the gospels and ta-da.
I don't, again, like you say, I don't know that they don't have they're not as theologically sophisticated in what they're doing, but I do think that they have a purpose in why they have Herod act this way compared to when Pilate and Lucius. So Pilate and Lucius are continuously religious skeptics, right? So they're the 1961 Americans, who are not interested in this kind of a thing, whereas Herod here is superstitious. He thinks, that Jesus may be John the Baptist brought from the dead. And so once he's convinced that he can do magic stuff, he thinks, wait a second, I'll just have him do a little miracle, but it's not going to be turn water into wine because I got plenty of wine. But I could always use a little more gold. It's just a little pot turned into gold. So in other words, because he believes in the supernatural stuff, that's the kind of thing
Right.
I think that they're trying to show that.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, so Jesus gets the royal robe slapped on him. He goes back to Pilate and his wife, and Lucius, who, of course, they're always hanging out on these couches, reclining, looking, very decadent, and ultimately,
They don't have a table. I mean,
no,
they have a lot of things, but they don't
little
have a
Roman
table.
table, yeah, exactly. And so Pilate's wife is like, why do you keep on, prosecuting this Jesus guy? What's his crime? What crime did he do? And he's like, well, there's all this talk of miracles and blah. Well, how's that a crime? And he says, and then ultimately Pilate's point is, look, you like him so much already. You've gone out and went to listen to the Sermon on the Mount, and you're Tiberius Caesar's daughter. If he can influence Caesar's daughter, he is dangerous. That's Pilate's contention, and so he tells the troops, go whip him. I want you to get a confession out of him. Go torture him. And so now we're going to get to that Mel Gibson level of gore and violence, right? That we had in the last movie, right? But no, it's very, very limited. We got a couple little red marks that are barely shown for a few seconds. I was able to capture it, and he's on his back for a little bit, and he's been beaten up. At least he's acting like he's hurt for the rest of this now. But anyway, he is tortured to some extent anyway, but what more or less we see is that flogging makes Judas go mad. So Judas starts to go insane. He wanders around. He sees the Roman construction guys making a cross, and he's like, oh no, he figures what that's going to do. So that makes him, also very upset and going kind of crazy. And so Judas is now tortured by what he's done. They now the Romans are the ones that put the crown of thorns on him. In fact, they're the ones that give him, I think, the robe too. Although maybe in the Lucan version it is Herod. I'd have to look at that. In any event, now we go to Barabbas, who is been also going mad in his cell, and we introduce two characters of two thieves who are also about to be crucified. And this is where the film makes a very interesting choice. So Barabbas has been this major character throughout all of the whole movie, but a character that only figures into one scene in the Bible. and that scene is now cut from the movie. And so essentially Barabbas is here in prison. Lucius, of course, is the one who comes and lets him out of prison. And Lucius, Barabbas is asking, why are you freeing me? Why are you letting me go? And so then Barabbas tells what's happened off screen in a scene that was not put into the movie.
And that's when I said, are you kidding me? You removed this super dramatic scene that, it's especially as we saw in the Passion of the Christ, it really puts the decision on the community.
Right. It's a mess.
All the community is like, it's on us and our children,
right.
Which is like a crazy problematic thing that we have in the Gospels, but it's there. And
what we said at the time, even though it was not, I think, understood that, it hasn't been understood that way multiple times into the future, that leading to Christian anti-Semitism. At the time, what the author of Matthew is doing, who is a Jewish Christian, what they're saying is it's not meaning on all Jews for all time. What it is saying, what he's talking about is, this is a way of predicting why Jerusalem was destroyed.
Right.
Which is, in other words, and so that's what is meant by that scene that is an invention of the evangelist. But what's surprising is that is the scene that's the only scene that Barabbas is in the Bible or whatever, and that's cut into exposition that's happened off screen that Lucius tells Barabbas now. Anyway, so
and
Barabbas
this is also, sorry, go ahead.
And so Barabbas goes free now.
But this is also where, we have the two characters of Judas, best buddies, Judas and Barabbas, who begin to feel guilt about Jesus. So that they both share the guilt, which is, of course, we never hear about any guilt of Barabbas in Matthew's gospel. But yeah, now Judas understands, Jesus either doesn't have the superpowers that I thought he had, or if he had them, he's not going to use them. So he's going to die.
Right. So he's realizing that here. Exactly.
He realizes he made a mistake. Yeah. And then now Barabbas also, once again, is like the element of guilt. Oh, look at all the horrible things that I've done.
Yeah.
And this guy that I didn't want to pair with, that I didn't want to join forces with because he was such a pacifist, now he's going to get killed and I'm going to go free. So both characters share this guilt.
Yeah. And by the way, these two thieves that are introduced here, of course, are going to be crucified with Jesus. So that's where getting those characters introduced down here in the cell. So Jesus now, in a pretty long scene, we have Jesus carrying the cross through Jerusalem scene. There's a big procession. We have that thing where Jesus' face is wiped. That was also in the Passion of the Christ. We have Barabbas watching. Everybody's watching, actually. So, Mary, the mother of Jesus, and John the Beloved, and behind them there, Mary Magdalene. In other words, everybody's they're actually in the procession. So they're following along. The whole thing comes outside of the walls of Jerusalem up to Golgotha. And even Pilate's wife, not Herod's wife. Pilate's wife is there watching. Lucius, of course, is in charge of the whole thing. He's very busy guy in the Roman employment. The soldiers take Jesus' garments. Mary and John just watch. He's, of course, put up on the cross, and with the two thieves, and now we have the vignette for the crucifixion scene. And we have the two different thieves that give their lines from the Gospel of Luke. Jesus on the cross. And that's where you're talking about here. Now we have Barabbas and Judas who are kind of sitting there watching, and Barabbas is saying, look, why is he dying for me? I never did anything for him, is essentially his kind of takeaway. Anyway, and so then we have the Romans put up a sign that says INRI, which is to say, Jesus Nazarenus Rex Iudaeorum, which is one of the ways it's portrayed in art with that abbreviation. Of course, it wouldn't mean anything to anybody to have those Latin abbreviation like that way on the actual cross. And then we have from the Gospel of John, Mary and John the Beloved at the foot of the cross, and then sort of really bizarrely, maybe I don't have a screen capture. Maybe I missed it already.
Oh.
Sort of bizarrely, we had while he looks down to Mary and says, "Woman, behold your son," and she's not, and it's not to say that your son is John the Beloved. It's like, I'm me. Look, behold me. And so it's like, it was so weird. It's like completely off.
So weird. Yeah.
I mean, the text. I mean, it's like taking the line and completely repurposing it for a completely different context. Behold your son, me. I'm dying. It's actually
Here I am.
He's actually saying, behold your son. To say that John the Beloved now is going to be your son. Behold your mother. Anyway, it was very strange. So anyway, so that's the crucifixion, and once we get to the end, we have all the great last line sayings. So he says, my God, why have you forsaken me?" which is the last line from Mark and Matthew. Then he says, "It's finished," which is from John. And then he finally says, "Father, into your hands I commend my soul," which is the last line in Luke. So he says those in order. Yeah.
Which is a theological salad. Because now we have three different Jesuses, especially like the apocalyptic Jesus as the Jesus is the suffering one from Jewish apocalypticism, and the idea of "it is finished" from the Gospel of John are quite incompatible.
Right.
On the one hand, we have a Jesus that is saying is having doubt at the most critical moment of his whole job.
Well, and by the way, because it's drawn from the vision of the suffering servant from the
suffering
Old Testament.
Servant, yes,
and so
the suffering servant of Handel's Messiah,
exactly,
right?
Whereas in John, like you say, it is finished. This is the God. This is the divine Logos who is in control at all times, including as he's being crucified, deciding now it's finished, and so then it's over. It's personally always in control.
This is the same Jesus that tells Judas, "Go,
right.
Betray me."
Right.
It is not something that is happening because God is forsaken me. This is something that is happening because I am in control here.
Right.
It is finished. So it is, by using all three quotes is really theologically doesn't make any sense.
No. Dartharama asks, back at the crucifixion, the carrying the cross scene, who was the person who carried the cross for Jesus? Wasn't it Simon somebody? So it's Simon of Cyrene. So it's a other character otherwise unknown in the story, but is known as the person who carried the cross. Yeah.
I think in the movie they say just give the cross to this Cyrenaic.
Yeah, right. Exactly. It says, here, guy from Cyrene, or whatever. They say,
They just carry crosses in Cyrene. So
the Romans could tell the guy was from Cyrenaic, and they say, "Here, Cyrenaic, come here." So they don't call him Simon, but they identify who he is that way in the movie. All right, and so then immediately after all three lines are said, we have Pilate's wife and Lucius kneel down, and Lucius says, he was truly the Christ. And so that's the big reveal. Our Lucius character is not just everyman Forrest Gump or whatever that was not appearing. He's actually is a character from the New Testament, which is to say he is the centurion who says, I don't know why his line has changed. It's like, truly this man is the Son of God, is what the centurion says. In other words, the centurion is converted essentially in the crucifixion period. But Lucius has had much more experience with Jesus since he's known him or of the situation ever since his birth. And he says, truly, he's the Christ for some reason, because it seems like he would, as a Roman, the idea of a son of God is much more understandable. But
And this is the first time in the movie that they use the word Christ.
Okay.
Because up until this moment, they say Messiah.
Okay.
And they say Messiah multiple times. But here, for the first time, and probably the last, is the word Christ in the movie.
Yeah. And so Lucius and Pilate's wife now become Christians. And of course, the idea that Pilate's wife becomes a Christian is part of later Christian tradition too.
It's tradition, procula.
Yeah. Of course, the crucifixion is then accompanied by cosmic, the thunder and lightning and everything like that happens, and so on.
Which is what causes Lucius to understand when he sees like this, almost like an ominous sign from the gods, as in Roman religion.
Yeah. So he's gone from being like a guy who was a skeptic the entire time, who was very secular, to a person who did all of his own research. He went as a spy to the Sermon on the Mount. He asked John the Baptist about the whole thing. The facts checking, they all add up. He now realizes this guy's the Christ, and so now he's going to be one of the disciples, presumably. So, although we don't see.
And I was expecting a little bit more of a theatrical showing of all the things that happen at this moment, but it's only like a little bit of a storm, and that's it.
Yeah, that's right. In other words, they have the whole temple set. They could have made the veil split and that kind of thing, right? But they didn't do that. Nope. All right, so none of that. Instead, we kind of cut to the aftermath, which is Joseph of Arimathea and Nicodemus take Jesus down from the cross with John the Beloved's help. Mary is there, and Jesus' body comes into her arms, and that kind of reenacting the Pieta, the art form of that. Barabbas finds Judas dead. He's hung himself, so the guilt Judas was feeling is ended, but Barabbas is going to live on and feel that guilt and failure and things like that.
And that's also interesting. Like Jesus, like the assumption is Jesus and Judas die at the same time.
Oh yeah. So it's not sometime later. It's right then. They take Jesus' body into a new tomb in the garden, and after they leave the body, Mary Magdalene is the last person to leave the tomb. She goes to sleep outside the tomb, and they roll a stone in front of it and all that kind of thing. But when she wakes up, the stone is already gone. So there's not a whole day here. It's just one night. And she wakes up the next morning, and the stone's already rolled back. He's already gone. She's already running around. Where is everybody? She does not run to go tell the disciples and come back and have everybody examine it or anything like that. But she does immediately meet the gardener, and it turns out the gardener is Jesus. He says to her, I'm going to go ascend to heaven now, but I'm going to meet up with everybody one last time. So let's have a meetup in Galilee and send everybody there. And so then we have the final scene. Go ahead.
Attention.
Yeah.
There's several weird things about this scene. It's not just the fact that she apparently slept by the tomb for 3 nights, but there's one thing that they get right. Like when she starts, it's dark.
Yeah.
This is from the Gospel of John, right? So John uses this play between night and day, light and darkness. So when Mary doesn't understand that Jesus, or not Jesus, but like the Christ is risen, she doesn't understand it's night, it's dark. When she understands, it's when the sun breaks, when there's light, when the morning breaks. So they sort of get it right. They start at night, like here, and then when she actually understands that she's looking at the risen Christ, then at that moment it's day. So you can see the daylight in the next scene.
Right.
So go to the scene where we can see Mary and Jesus. Yeah, here. So you can see that here the sun is rising, and that's when Jesus turns, or this gardener turns and looks at her, and she recognizes who this is. But it's supposed to be someone who looks physically different because the way that they do it here is like she's looking at his back, and that's
Right.
why she doesn't understand who he is. But that's not how the Gospel of John portrays the the resurrected Jesus. The
Right.
resurrected Jesus is someone who you look at him and you don't know who he is.
Right.
So in this scene, it's like silly. It's like, oh, now I turn, now you know who I am. And also something weird is that in the Gospel of John, Jesus says, Mary. And it is at this point that she realizes who he is. But
Yeah.
here they chose the word, instead, Jesus says Magdalene, which is like, why change even that? So it's a lot of weirdness.
Well, maybe they were afraid that that you get confused which Mary it is. Although I don't know. I mean, we've had both characters the whole time. They're both named Mary. I don't know. So yeah, it is a little strange. Yeah. So they also mention, the narrator also mentions other appearances, right? And so the road to Emmaus, which was a story from the Gospel of Luke, where the risen Christ appears to two disciples as they're walking along a whole way, and it's only after they've been with him for all this time that they realize that it's the risen Christ, right? And so that's another example of what you're talking about. And same thing from the Gospel of John, actually, which is this event.
Yeah.
They're up the shore of the Sea of Galilee, and the disciples have an encounter with the risen Christ, and they also don't know it's him until they experience a miracle of the great catch. In this case, that's not portrayed at all in this movie's predilection to not ever show miracles. And instead, there's a kind of a weird idea that you just hear Jesus' voice as a voiceover, and ultimately his kind of shadow as then he gives everybody.
As a cross.
Yeah, which creates a cross. Yeah, and he more or less tells everybody then, not just Peter, he tells them all to go feed my sheep, go make disciples in all lands. So,
which is again another very interesting, I don't want to say weird again, but an interesting choice, because this is John's version of the Last Supper. So in the Gospel of John, Jesus doesn't break wine and break bread and share wine with the disciples before the crucifixion. Instead, what happens in the Last Supper of John is Jesus washes the disciples' feet.
Right.
Whereas in this scene that happens last at the end, in the last chapter 21 of John, in this scene after this miracle of the great catch, the only one who knew who he was John, and then it's only when they sit down.
It's the beloved disciple.
Right.
Well, yeah.
And the beloved disciple.
Yeah, you're right. John.
Thanks for the correction.
Yeah.
The beloved disciple knows, but the other ones don't know.
That's right.
And it's only when they sit and start eating the fish,
he breaks the fish
that they caught, that they
yeah.
realize, oh, I know who you are. Only at that moment.
Right. Yeah. Natural Philosophy asks, is there a difference between the Orthodox and Catholic crucifix? Because the Catholics say that sign that says, here, Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews, is parallel, while the Orthodox show it crooked. And I don't know the answer to that in terms of that's like iconographically what they maybe is done, but
I don't know, but I have seen it crooked at some Catholic churches that I don't know if it was intentionally crooked or it just had gone crooked.
Yeah. So I'm sorry to say, we have Natural Philosophy, we don't know the answer to that.
I don't know.
So. All right. Well, and that takes us to the end of the movie, and then they have what is called exit music. And so, again, in the grand sense of it, we get back one last time. Like I said, in the end, I really warmed up to the music. I liked it all the way through. It's one of the major characters of this movie. And so, I guess we're to sum up time. What are your thoughts on this movie? What was your feeling about it? Leandro, you hadn't known of this movie, and really, I don't know that you've seen too many of these movies like this.
I haven't. So I think it's a very interesting exercise because it really makes you think. It makes you wonder, wait, where does that come from?
Yeah.
Is that in scripture? So actually, it's a really interesting exercise to see how much you know about scripture when you watch these movies, and it's almost like fun to just to find out what's in and what's not. But another thing is like I believe that we all have, you know, we all imagine we all fill in the gaps when we read scripture, and some of those gaps have been filled by things that we heard, by tradition that has filled the gaps of, you know, all these parts of the narrative that are not really in scripture. But we still have our own creative thinking to think of how we went from here to there, and I think it's fine. There's nothing wrong with that, but I was thinking as a theologian, like what makes this very deliberate attempt of retelling the story and filling the gap and emphasizing some events, sort of skipping others. Like, you know, why would you skip the resurrection of Lazarus, or, you know, like very important moments in the story of Jesus? If you're collecting from all gospels, just use the big hits, and yet some have been left out.
Yeah,
and so
that's an interesting one.
Yeah, so what's the whole idea behind it, and how is that different from writing your own gospel?
Yeah, I feel like, yeah, like you say, I feel like rather though than having a particular take and wanting to write their own thing, that there really was a sense that they just wanted to have a Jesus movie and they wanted to be able to do it. And the editorial decisions, I think, are framed around the decision to make Lucius, in other words, which we call the centurion, who at the end acknowledges that, you know, Jesus was the Son of God or is the Son of God, to make that guy one of the main characters, to make Barabbas one of the main characters, to have to rework the Judas character in order to have him have that backstory with Barabbas, and then to have essentially the courtly characters, you know, Pontius Pilate, his wife, Herod, his wife, his stepdaughter, having all of those be kind of like the main characters of this movie, way more, by the way, than any of the disciples. You know, if Peter has a couple lines, but if John the Beloved is a speaking role, I'm not really aware of it. I mean, he's wandering around, you know, in the background. You know, you can identify him, and the other disciples, I don't think. I mean, some of them are named, but I couldn't have been able to pick them out of a lineup or what any of them did. So it is an interesting decision of deciding, like you say, what characters are the important characters, what you want to emphasize, that kind of thing. So
I agree with you. It's not a movie about Jesus and the disciples, but about Lucius and the questionable characters.
Yeah.
Judas in this, Barabbas, and so in that sense, it makes sense as a movie of these other characters and their transformation. And some are transformed, you know, some, as you mentioned, some go from skepticism to belief.
Yeah, right.
Once they have enough evidence to believe, which is not necessarily what the Gospels say. You should believe without, you know, the evidence. And then the other characters is like, you know, the ones who realize that they messed up, and then they end up, you know, feeling, you know, carrying guilt. Yeah. And so it's a movie about them more than a movie about, you know, Jesus and the disciples.
Yeah. Well, it's very, very interesting. It's an interesting exercise. I'd never seen this movie before either. And actually, what's surprising is, you know, there's how few of these I've seen. So, I mean, I definitely have seen Ben-Hur. I've seen, but a long time ago. I've seen and know very well the Ten Commandments. But I have not seen, for example, The Greatest Story Ever Told. I have not seen The Last Temptation of Christ. I have not seen Jesus Christ Superstar.
We should
or
watch
Joseph
those
and the Amazing
and
Technicolor Dreamcoat. You know, I haven't seen any of these. So anyway, there's lots more of these that we can do. People will have to tell us, do you like these as a format? It's we can't do new lectures every time because of the sometimes we're very, very busy. I've been working on our Christmas Eve service, which is tomorrow, and so can't do lecture every week, but if you like these when we can't do one, let us know. There's some summaries that people have given. So Bo the Wolf said, this movie was dry. If it were any drier, a coyote would be chasing a roadrunner in the background. So I think part of that is that, good old Jeffrey Hunter, old Blue Eyes here, as Jesus is such an ethereal Jesus as they're trying to show him, that he's not somebody who anybody would easily follow because he lacks the kind of, any kind of charisma or feeling that you would want to, So I think that's at the heart of it. This is a movie, like Leandro was kind of saying, that's about all of these kind of side questionable characters. So it's about Lucius and his character arc, Pilate's wife's character arc, and then kind of the Barabbas and Judas and how they didn't get it, that kind of a thing. So as we wrap up, let's just listen to a couple more sum ups we have. So Fire Ever Living, I watched the movie recently. I really liked the sets, but the writing was fairly bad. I actually feel the Bible itself does a better job. Well, okay, that's good. Fire Ever Living says, it was weird how they kept very closely to the Bible in many places to the film's detriment, and then they just made up a ton of stuff, which is true. There's just some weird, like I was saying, this is just going off into weird fan fiction every once in a while. I'm like, okay, what was that scene for? That's very interesting. Yeah. Darth Arama says, I watched it again today too. It really does take all of the best bits of the Gospels. The close-up on the blue eyes is funny, and I think so too. I thought that was pretty amazing and interesting. Actually, I hadn't noticed it. They should have done that more in the pilot of Star Trek. The Theologians, whenever they're using their mind powers on Captain Pike, they should have seen his eyes, So that's something they missed in that pilot. Dave Latour, I think in all, the movie worked for its time. It could have been done 20 years earlier. It didn't break new ground, but it was effective. I totally agree with you. I feel like this represents a much more primitive style of Hollywood classic, both in terms of its writing, in terms of its kind of non-historical costumes, more fanciful set. It's more like theater Hollywood as opposed to, the kind of thing that they're going to come up with even contemporaneously with Ben-Hur. Well, we'll have to look at it. I think I'm maybe remembering it through a child's eyes, but anyway. So, all right. So very good. So thank you all so very much. Leandro, thank you for joining us as you're taking time out from all visiting family down there in Argentina. Have a very Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas to
Merry Christmas,
everyone.
Happy New Year, Happy Holidays,
and to all
everyone.
of you too, Happy Holidays. And we will see you in the new year. We're not having any lectures for the next couple of weeks, but it'll be in after we get back from break in the new year. Thanks again.
Thank you.